much a part of everything. That just getting cops to take some police community courses is not what the problem is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I would agree that that's not the solution.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't think our generation, meaning Generation Z/millennials, think that is either.
No, the solution seems to be, and this is what I think it is, and I think that's what most people think it is regulating the police and defunding their military equipment.
Right. Well, yeah, definitely. Well, actually, they get their military equipment for free from the.
Right, and that should be stopped. That should absolutely be not allowed.
Well, it wasn't allowed until Jeff Sessions vetoed Obama's bill. Yeah, whenever we're ready. I know it's 1, but I think we can control when we go live. So assume people can't hear you yet, unless I'm wrong. In which case,
I'm just wondering if we want some of.
One. Hello and welcome to the Comedy Studio Podcast,
the only podcast. That was good. That was the best we're ever gonna do.
That was ever gonna get.
We
I don't know.
We should record that and just put that in the opening from now on.
We should always strive for greatness, you and I. I'm Danny Hatch. I'm here with Eli Levy. Hi, Eli.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I am as good as I can be.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about today. We're, of course, joined by our very special guest. He's the owner of the Comedy Studio. It's always a treat to get him on the podcast. Please welcome Rick Jenkins to the show.
Yeah, sorry I missed last week.
That's okay.
Don't worry about it.
Let's get into that before we get serious. You missed last week's because you were doing a TV interview.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about that? Wet our fans' whistles?
No, I mean, it's interesting. They were asking a lot of questions about, what history of Boston comedy and why so many good people come out of Boston and all that. And then they were asking a lot of questions about, as a small business, how are you getting through this time? How the, what the future looks like, how you're being done. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's 2 stories coming out of it. But or they just weren't focused on what the story was going to be.
And this was for Chronicle?
Yeah.
The news program Chronicle. Any idea on when that's going to air?
No, he just said a couple weeks and then he'd let us know.
Okay. And they sent a full camera crew out to you at the club, which I was surprised to hear.
Well, not full. So there was a cameraman and the reporter. And apparently they had to take, they had masks on and they had to take separate cars. So in theory, everyone was completely socially distanced. I mean, he was a good 10 feet away from me and asking the questions and a good 14 feet away from me and filming.
I'm glad everyone was safe. So, and I'm glad you're back on the podcast.
Okay.
Today is Wednesday. We usually record these on Tuesday, but there was a media blackout yesterday to raise awareness of what's going on right now. The 3 of us, I'll state the obvious and get it out of the way, are white men. We are.
That's news to me.
White men.
Well, I tend to fluctuate, but
I'm pretty white.
I'm in a heteronormative relationship. Oh yeah, we're all very white, but on the sexuality spectrum, who knows?
Okay.
Some days end in Y, some days end in bi. And so we are the least qualified to talk about this, but we have a platform, and so we should talk about it to the best of our limitations and strive beyond them. What does that mean?
I think that's a good idea for what we're about to do.
Yes, that means listening, but that
We
means
know what to
also
listen to.
talking. It means sharing resources. So some background in case anyone listening has taken up residence under a rock, which I hear is lovely this time of year. About a week and a half ago on Memorial Day, George Floyd was murdered on camera by a police officer who knelt on his neck for 7 minutes. It was captured in a video that was widely shared and was the spark, I think, after a series of killings of black men and women by the police or by their fellow community members. This was, I think, the spark after a series of those that ignited these current protests we're seeing in every state in the nation. People are protesting en masse, protesting police brutality, protesting racism, protesting to show their support of Black lives and that they matter. It's been wild to watch them. I have not been participating, which we can talk about. I know, Eli, you went to a protest last night.
Yeah, I went to one protest, so
What was
I'm not doing a whole lot, to be honest.
Don't say. We can self-flagellate all we want, and I did a good amount of it. But I think it's
We
important
can do
that
that later. Give us a report from the scene.
Yeah.
It was a peaceful protest. It was really nice. 3,000 people showed up, which was I think more than that too. It was amazing.
Where was it? Was this the one in JP?
Yeah, in JP near Franklin, in Franklin Park. It was good. We marched. We walked all the way from the entrance of where the zoo entrance is, all the way down that road to where the hospital is, and there's a large field next to it, and that's where most of the congregation was. And people were giving speeches. There were leaders there giving speeches, talking about legislation, talking about different ways to help black businesses. It was great. It was really good.
Was it set up with microphones at a podium and stuff?
I couldn't see much, to be honest, because I did not have a great spot. But from what I could see, it looks like there were some tents. I think they had some megaphones and a small speaker system.
Can you share what any?
There is some loose organization.
I wouldn't say loose organization, just how much sound equipment costs a lot of money, so
And it's hard to come by, especially now.
Yeah, it's also hard to transport if you think you're going to have to leave very quickly or in a hurry.
What were some of the things that you learned, or some of the ways that these leaders talked about to help black businesses?
I will say before that it was actually very well organized. When I got there were like different attendees from the organizers, showing people where to go. There are lots of people like set up to give like snacks and water and medical attention if need be. There were multiple stations along the whole way, which was really nice. And yeah, there were people like being like, all right, everyone's going this way. Make sure to follow these directions. Make sure you're courteous and social distance and be safe and everything. People handing out masks and hand sanitizer. There were people walking around. There was also a hot dog stand at next to the zoo that was open. But I did not.
What did you say the racial makeup was?
It was a lot of white people, but there were also a lot of black people, which was good. It was strange driving in because there was a woman outside of her home yelling at everybody, and I wasn't sure who she was yelling at, so we thought she was like yelling in support, and then it turned out she was not, and it made me feel kind of weird because then I was like, well, what am I doing here? Am I doing the right thing?
What do you mean?
It was a black woman yelling at us.
Yelling at you for being there.
Not me specifically, but all the protesters walking up. Yeah, like why? She was basically asking, "What are you doing here? What are you hoping to accomplish?"
Okay. Well, what were you hoping to accomplish?
Again, I think the goals for the protest, and I could be wrong, are defunding the military, I guess if they get it for free, but like making it so that the police don't have access to military equipment, and also regulating the police more strictly. In general.
I mean, it seems pretty obvious that, to me at least, that police regulation is desperately needed now.
Absolutely. I think Joe Biden said he would have a whole committee specifically to regulate the police, but I don't know.
I would hope he follows through on that. I would
Yeah.
hope that in a few weeks or a month, whenever the next heinous thing happens and pushes this out of people's minds for a minute, I hope that he won't forget about that.
Well, and the tough thing is that those police forces aren't federal. So no matter what Joe Biden does, you still have to worry about that, that racist council member or that, that ignorant mayor.
Of course, but but
also there's always somebody that can do something about it, whether it's the federal government or the state government. So if you have to petition to the state government, it's still the same ask. Hey, come up with a committee to regulate the police force.
Yes, and one easy step that I hope that the Biden administration, who I hope to God, exists in 2021 in this country, they can reverse the lifting of the military hardware ban that the Trump administration lifted. The Obama administration had put a ban on surplus military hardware being sent to these police forces, and in August 2017, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions lifted that ban. I think that is certainly, I don't want to say an easy first step, but that is an actionable step, I think, right?
Yeah.
And that's on the federal level. And if it sounds like I'm floundering, I am. I don't know. I have a really embarrassing lack of knowledge and context for this, I guess, which I'm going to work on changing.
I would agree that this is not my strong suit, nor have
I
ever really done a lot in my life for the cause.
Yeah, I mean, and that's my feeling is I see a lot of police stuff that we can do and we can change these laws and that law. I think the bigger thing is racism in America, which is just huge. I mean, as you said, we're all straight white guys. We all got, our parents worked to make sure that we had advantages, and now you have to look and go, advantages over who? We have benefited from a racist system, and I think that's going to be a big part of it is us looking at ourselves and saying, yeah, the problem isn't just that cop. The problem is also that I've been brought up in and I've worked in a system that isn't fair to everyone.
Yeah. Well, that's why our the only thing that we can do is vote for change. That's why our vote matters so much, is that everybody should be voting towards these specific fixes. And also, reaching out to lawmakers, congresspeople, your local senators to come up with these laws that we then vote for.
And what can we, the three of us, as somewhat gatekeepers of an industry, which is Boston comedy, I know that we are not the lords of Boston comedy, but we run a comedy club in Boston. What can the three of us and everyone who works for this company, what can we do to help propel black voices at the very least? I mean, we can't end racism, the three of us alone, but we can chip away at it. How do we do that?
When we also have to remember, sexism is in there, homophobia is in there as well.
Sure. So what are some actionable steps we can take?
Well, we should continue to support local charities, and we should be, selective with what those local charities are based on, the climate of what needs the most help.
Yeah, and the most obvious thing is, do we change booking? Or do we look at booking as a mechanism to promote?
That would be saying that we don't book the most moral. But I do think that we should try and book as openly and fairly as possible.
Yeah, what do you mean we don't book the most moral? What does that mean?
Well, Rick saying that we should change our bookings would imply that our bookings are not good.
Oh. We're getting...
I'm not going to say that they're the best.
No, they're not.
But I would like to think that we book based on who's funny.
Sure, but there's, who's funny, who gets in front of us the most, who has the most access to shows and promotion and publicity. I think would be... Go ahead.
I think that's the question: is color considered, and should it?
I think yes. I think it should be.
I think it's a part of it, but I would also say that, if somebody of a certain race wants to perform but is not funny, I think that needs to be considered. But
sure, but there are plenty of hilarious Black and Indigenous people of color.
Absolutely.
In the community, and we should at least focus on lifting up Black voices.
I would agree.
More. Not that we're great at it, not that we're bad at it, but that there is room for improvement. And I think
I would agree.
It's hard to admit when you're flawed, which we are in certain respects. But I mean, now is the time, I think, to be at least somewhat proactive, right? I don't know. Again.
Well, I mean, I would agree that there are Black comedians that I know in this city that we don't book that we should book. And I do feel bad about that.
I think the fact that we, as an organization, we as a club and comedy in Boston in general, it's just so white that that it can't be completely by accident that the best people just happen to all be white.
I don't think that the best people in the city are white. I think there are plenty of insanely hilarious people that we don't book that are not white.
How come?
I don't know.
For what reason?
I don't know. I only started booking at this club very recently.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put anyone in the hot seat. I'm just trying to open up a discussion.
Well, and as you know, I generally try to, when doing the bookings and picking comic in residence and all that, I generally do try to have, certain guidelines, certain amounts of we want to have at least this much diversity, because I think diversity strengthens a show. But is that enough? And and then we got pushback from someone on a podcast saying,
Andre.
"Hey, why are you using these people when I'm better or my friends are better? Shouldn't you be working with the best comic?"
Well, he was asking why we didn't book Jason Cordova.
What's going on?
Well,
we did Anjan's podcast a little bit ago, if you remember. And one of the things was Anjan was saying that we don't book enough Black people on our shows, or specifically he said hood comics, but he was referencing specifically Jason Cordova.
Okay. I don't know Jason. Is there a reason that we haven't booked him?
No, he's very good. He was almost comic in residence like 5-6 years ago when he started out. And yeah, just haven't seen him. He hasn't been around the studio in the last 2 or 3 years. And I guess in the last 2 or 3 years, he's come back and really, really made strides and is really very, very good. But again, that's stuff we're hearing.
Well, then let's make an effort to reach out to him and see if he's interested in performing on one of our shows.
Right? He did that show that we did with Chris Tabb in February. And Chris Tabb is another example of someone that I haven't seen at the studio, but I've seen around the city.
Yeah, I had only seen him at that show, and he slayed. He was the closer.
I've heard he's very good.
So this is hard to talk about. I mean,
It is.
But it's important now. I mean, I am very good at sticking my head in the sand and having good intentions, but not taking action, because I'm something of a coward. So I'm going to have to drag myself into a realm of taking more direct action, and I know that's hard, but it involves these hard conversations. I'm going to be sharing a list of resources in the show notes for this podcast that I have found helpful.
I've already posted a link to the bail fund, the mass bail fund, both in the comments and the description.
Excellent.
So if you're listening, please check that out. That is the mass bail fund to help any of the protesters who have been arrested during these protests.
So Rick, you've been around longer than Eli and I have. You've been around on the planet longer.
I was born in 1961, so I was 7 years old during that summer of 1968 when everything hit the fan. So I have some memory of that, but what wasn't on the front lines.
No, of course, but you've grown up in an America that has gone through a lot of changes. Have you noticed any patterns, any cyclical happenings? I mean, do you since 1968, have you noticed change in opinion or?
Yeah, I mean, you even go through, Nixon to Carter, you have that swing back and forth a little bit, and, all good meaning, well-meaning and all that. But yeah, I think so much of it goes back to the roots of, what the country is built on, that it's, well-meaning and we change this law and that law, but the real core hard conversation of, yeah, you know what, I'm a little bit better off because someone else is not. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's where I thought the woman with the dog in Central Park was the real one, because she's
was
Canadian.
The real what?
What was the thing that really, really struck me? Okay. Because she was liberal. She was, if we met her at a party or something, if she was on this podcast, she'd probably be on the exact same side we are. Mm-hmm. But she said, I'm going to call the police, knowing that the police were going to take her side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember once when we were at the studio, and Sean Bedgood, if you don't know, a very, very good black comedian, was stopped by the police. He and his friend were stopped by the police right in front of the studio. And just, your basic driving while black, open up the trunk, let us see and everything. And, he was obviously, pissed off and, rightly so, and irritated. And, the cops were like, yeah, just shut up. We're looking. And my instinct was, okay, wait. Let me handle this. I'm a white guy. I can fix this. And I think that sort of like, I can talk to both sides. I think that's a lot of the racism in me and in a lot of us, that we know that if shit's going down, we call the police and they're on our side.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I grew up in, I always say Memphis, but really I grew up in a suburb of Memphis, Germantown, Tennessee. And Germantown is a very small town right outside of the border of Memphis that is very notorious for having an insanely racist police force. Like, driving while black you see it all the time. There's like one main road. If you drive down it, if you see somebody pulled over, chances are they're probably black, because anytime somebody black enters Germantown, they get pulled over by the police. And every time I've been pulled over by the police in Germantown, I've gotten a warning 3 times, and it's not because I wasn't. It's not because they falsely accused me of doing something. It's just because I look the way I look.
Like if you were black, you would have gotten a ticket.
I got pulled over in Memphis one time with my friend while I was in college in Germantown, and we had weed on us. And I was let go because I didn't have anything on my person. My friend did. He got arrested, but if I was black and I also had nothing on me, I would have also been arrested for sure.
And it's also on top of that big event, even if that wasn't happening, the fact that when you leave the house and you're a black man, you have to think about not doing anything so that you might call that upon yourself. Whereas as a white guy, I don't have to think about that at all. I think that's where a lot of the racism is. It's very easy for us to see these big events. I mean, a lot of it is just so subtle. I got overcharged for a couple tomatoes yesterday. I went back to the store and said, "Hey, I got overcharged." They go, "Okay, let me fix that." If I were black, I have no doubt there would probably be a little bit more of like, "Okay, let me take a look at that. Let me look at the receipt."
So I guess another question is, what can we do to, I don't want to use the word convince, but there are people who don't believe that racism is a thing, or that black people are, much more heavily targeted by the police. What can we do to, for lack of a better word, convince them that they're wrong? Or educate them, I guess is a better word.
It's very hard to convince someone that something they've believed their entire life is wrong. And it's even harder to do it in a way that doesn't make it seem like you're attacking them.
Yes.
Which is, as soon as you start getting angry at somebody, they get defensive. So no matter what you say, they're just not going to go the way you want them to go.
And almost nobody thinks they're racist.
Ooh,
they think, oh, you know what, slavery was a long time ago, and there's some bad apples in the black community, and they're using that as an excuse. There just happens to be differences between the races, and we have to take that into consideration. Nobody sees themselves as a bad racist. I know a lot of them. You don't see yourself they don't see themselves as a bad racist that needs to be educated. They see themselves as someone who just has a better understanding than we do.
So then the trick is to show them a different perspective, right?
If any of us knew the answer to this question, life would be so much easier. But yes. I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that because, I have seen some people successfully convince people who are have hardcore beliefs that they're actually wrong. But it's very rare to find someone like that who can do that.
Yeah, and going all the way back, like I said, to 68, you got assassinations along with marches and all that sort of stuff. I remember a lot of the talk in my neighborhood was, oh, the black kids just like sitting at their own lunch table. They want to be, they want to be themselves. When we're all playing in the playground, the black kids naturally hang out together. So we're not doing that. They want to sit in the back of the bus.
Well, it's the weirdest thing is how much of society has adopted culture and media and art forms that have come from the black community. Mm-hmm. I'm from Memphis, so Elvis stole rock and roll. He did. But so much of what we love, what's popular in culture today, comes from the black community. And even people who are racist, even if they know, there are some people who know they're racist but still love, rap and hip hop and, movies that come from the black community.
90% of those people say, I'm not racist, I love Jay-Z.
It does come to that sometimes, but at the same time, you'll find someone who does love Jay-Z, but thinks these protests are going against what Jay-Z would like. You know what I mean? Or something like that. It's just weird how ingrained that is into our culture, but we can't see that it's all the same.
Yeah, and I think it goes all the way back to like I said, to birth. Whites have much better, on average, have better health care, which means they're going to be eating better, which means they're going to be taking care of the doctor better, which means by the time they're 14 and 15, most white kids have had more advantages than brown or black kids.
Yeah.
So of course, if you're in school and you're doing better on all the tests, and you're going to think, oh, well, you know what? I just happen to be better. And that actually goes to my theory about Trump is I don't think Trump is a racist in that he sees it divided along race. I think he sees it as there are people born winners and people born losers, and there just happen to be more losers born among the other races. And that that there are loser white people and there are winner black people, but it just happens to be minorities.
I think he is racist, but I think what he really sees is just obstacles and people that'll let him through. And anyone who gets in his way is an obstacle.
Sure, I'm not going to begin to pretend I understand the psychology of whatever's going on in his...
Psychology is a very loose definition for what's going on in that head.
Pudding brain of his. But there are concrete examples of his racism. He wouldn't rent to black tenants with his father in the 70s. He doesn't want black accountants counting his money. He wants Jews and Asian people because they're better at handling money than black people.
I failed math, by the way.
What's that?
I failed algebra
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too. My dad had to teach it to me over the summer of 7th grade because I failed it so bad. And that certainly wasn't even the nadir of my...
I used my calculator to add 17 plus 4.
Yeah, it's 26.
Damn
it. So he is racist. I mean, let's not try. I at least am not going to try to ascribe different motivation to Donald Trump than racism.
There are many reasons that he's a shitty person. He is definitely
yes, and I'm
a racist.
sure he does see the world as winners and losers, but I think he also sees it as black people and white people, because we know because of the things he's said and done in the past. So that I am very comfortable and confident saying. The rest of it, I don't know, because I'm not educated enough. And I'm going to certainly work on that. But I don't know what to do. I mean, I have members of my family who don't believe this is an issue. How do I stand up to them without burning bridges? Because I'm very good at doing it and burning bridges and getting them to not only not see my point, but to buckle down against it even harder. Or double down against it.
Well, here's one of the weirdest things. I was talking...
what's my role here?
Yeah. Well, no, it's just about that. It's just like you have family members that believe this or believe that. And like you'll even have friends that believe all this weird stuff. And I was talking to my roommate about it yesterday before we went to the protest. Some of these people live in a bubble. Like he was talking about this experiment where like this person only followed like right-wing Facebook groups or like all these different Christian groups and stuff like that. And they tried to see like how it would change their news feed every day. And it was basically like they were living in an alternate dimension. Like all the things that we know that we get from the news, they were not getting at all. Like,
and our job is to somehow transmit that information.
So like some of these people that believe this stuff, it's because it's the only thing they're being told. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're not seeing the other side. And if they do see the other side, the side they already see has already convinced them that side is made up or wrong. And it's just weird to break people it's hard to break people out of their bubble.
Of course it is.
I think instead of racism, most of those people see themselves as America is a meritocracy. And if something happened to a black person, well, that was just an anomaly. Who's ever best is going to get the job, is going to get the nicer apartment, is going to get the healthcare, is going to get admitted to college. I mean, hey, we clearly have celebrities spending millions of dollars to get their kids into a college. What chance you have, or even now with COVID, you've got to be teaching from home. Well, how many poor kids have, and that's why I think it goes to class as well as race, how many poor kids have internet access and a laptop and a parent who's going to be able to sit there and say, hey, it's 9 o'clock, you have to get online. Are you doing your homework? Instead of, I've got to go to the grocery store because I'm doing 2 jobs to try and have enough to to have the apartment, much less the internet access.
And I think that's where a lot of it comes from is parenting. Parenting is probably the most important factor to help somebody have like a good worldview as they grow up is, when you're being raised as somebody telling you, hey, not everyone has the same chances that you do to make something of your life. And I've had that talk plenty of times with my parents about like, hey, we've provided all these chances for you. So don't waste them.
That also all goes all the way back to slavery, that when the Civil War was won and you had the Emancipation Proclamation, that was a lot of that was just like, okay, you're free, go. So these families had already been separated and sold to other. You had people just, you had black people wandering around going like, well, I'm free now. I'm gonna try and find my family. You got the slavery not only destroyed, hurt the soul, but it also just destroyed your entire world, your entire worldview. And that means every family that comes after that is going to have some of those scars.
Yeah. It's weird. The North and South are not so different now, but there are some major differences when it comes to race or like race relations. In some parts of the South, it's fine. There's no problems. But in some parts, it's still like it never left the 1800s.
And what is their justification in those parts of the South for keeping things that way?
I guess the best way to phrase it is that's how they were raised. That's what, like, it comes back to parenting. It's just like
such a flimsy.
Well, it's not. No one's saying it's not a flimsy argument. It's just
no, I know.
When you're, it is a way people live their lives. Sometimes it's the way my grandpappy did it. It's the way that his grandfather did it. It's the way that his grandfather did it. So that's the way we're gonna do it. And no one's been around to really tell them differently in any way that's not combative. So no one's really challenged how their family's done it without them feeling attacked. So they've still felt like they're right.
Well, I guess we have to try to fix that, Eli, you and me.
Well, it's just, people get mad at each other all the time. And you don't... it's hard to really solve stuff when everybody's hitting each other. But at the same time, there's reasons people are hitting each other.
It's the house on fire analogy.
What is that analogy, Rick?
We're putting out this house that's on fire, and you've got people saying, hey, how come you're putting out that house when my house is right next door? It's like, well, because this one's on fire.
Yeah. Oh, that's I'm trying to think.
Oh, the All Lives
Matter. Why the Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter? Yeah. That analogy makes sense.
Yeah, it's weird. I never hear these All Lives Matter people bring that up until a black person is murdered, and there's a video of it, like it's snuff film pornography that everyone's sharing.
Well, it's rationalized by the bad apple.
And then you hear, well, all lives matter, though. I believe everyone matters. And then what I'm doing right now is not helpful, making a mockery of this shit, even though I think it is a detestable attitude to have. But also I recognize that I'm not going to change anyone's mind by calling them detestable. So that's something I have to work on, I guess. But do I even? I don't know.
It's just don't call,
some other way to... I don't know. See,
I think it's just, I think the way to get to it is just to ask questions. You know what I mean? Like, when they say all lives matter, it's like, well, do you really believe that? Like,
yeah.
Are you only saying that because you don't want to care about this issue? Or are you only saying that because it's convenient for you to say that and then feel better? Mm-hmm. And if you want to feel better, what do you want to feel better about?
Yeah, that's a great point, Eli.
And I have never used that strategy once to any avail.
In philosophy.
But this is how we start to do it. I mean, that's a great tool, Eli. And the fact that you have it in your toolkit means that you're a step ahead of the rest of us. My cat is really enjoying this. Do not knock the water over again. Sorry.
In philosophy, that generally the way you actually change someone's mind is by agreeing with them. and then slowly turning it the other way. I'm not sure we'd be comfortable with that.
Oh, sure, like an undercover mission, essentially.
I don't know if you have to agree with it, but you can have to at least be like, I see where you're coming from. But that's different from agreeing with somebody.
I'm just saying, I'm not talking about this case specifically, but in general, that's the
I also mean in general, it's
best way to change someone's mind is to start by saying, yeah, me too. It's just, well, I can see where that would.
that's lying. The best way to get someone to agree with you is to lie.
Right, exactly. What I'm saying is, I don't know how many of us would be comfortable for that.
I will say I don't know if that's the best strategy. I've tried it. It doesn't work very well.
Well, it could make you president, though. So who knows? I mean,
lies and insults is how you get to the presidency.
Arming, yes, that's true. The secret sauce is the insults. I mean, arming yourself with data and facts also, I think, is helpful, and that's something that I want to work on for myself, is to be able to be familiar enough with these explicit, specific details that I can pull them out in an argument instead of being like, well, no, there's all this anecdotal evidence, which there is, but that's not as convincing to people. If I were able to have statistics ready, have, explicit details ready, maybe I would be better at changing minds.
Yeah, I would
certainly has changed my, it's made it easier for me to understand.
I wouldn't beat myself up about that, because I think rationally we have a very, very clear argument. It's very, very blatant that racism actually.
But it's
hurts
not to
the
some
society.
people.
And all that.
I know people
Well,
who
one thing
don't.
this is mostly being argued and fought on an emotional level.
Yes.
And
being
able to say, well, these numbers, this shows this, isn't going to change those people's minds.
I used to be one of those people where I was like, why isn't everybody just thinking about this logically? And I was wrong about that, because I've started to realize as I've grown up that some things are emotional, and it's okay to be emotional, and it's also okay to react based upon those emotions, but it's after that where progress should come. You get brought to a certain point, there's not really much you can do. You can't just suppress your emotions.
Yeah, one thing I've had to deal with is, like, I have so many friends who are black, and avoid that thinking of, oh, let me check in with my black friend, and hey, I'm okay, right? You're black, you can represent everyone and let me know I'm okay, I'm not racist. There's also a lot of that of.
When you say check in, do you mean legitimately checking in on your friends to ask about their emotional state during times like this, or check in just for validation that you are one of the good ones?
Right. Well, I mean, I check in. I think I'm checking in emotionally. An ex-girlfriend now has 3 kids, and they're living in New Hampshire. And I'm like, hey, I've been thinking about you. Worried about what these things must be going on. But yeah, of course, you've always got that little thing saying like, oh, but I'm one of the good ones, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody wants to be one of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let that fear stop you, I guess would be my advice.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with asking your friend, hey, are you okay? Especially during a time where they might not be okay. Right. But, if they, respond negative, if they happen to respond negative,
don't ask that.
Negatively to you, that's also fine.
I do understand your impulse, Rick. I have black friends I haven't reached out to because I don't want to seem like I'm piling on. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I could say, if I could even say anything.
Yeah, Tukey had a very good post today about, if you're replying to someone, it's not about you. It's not like, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, no, just listen and understand what they're talking about. You don't have to, you don't have to say, oh, once I got caught stealing the candy or something, it's not about it.
You're right.
I'd agree with that.
Not. And as comedians, notoriously the least self-involved people,
we never make anything about ourselves.
It should be very easy for us to not make this about us.
and that's where I also go into that, that mindset of like, well, do we reach out to Jason Cordoba? Would we reach out to him if he wasn't black?
Yeah, Jason specifically, yes. I've seen his act; it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, we reach out to very few people.
Meaning we let people come to us.
Yeah, generally it's
requests.
people coming to us and we see them and they audition and.
I mean, there are some people that I've wanted to reach out to because I've seen them before and I think they're hilarious, and I want to get, I want them to put them on the studio stage.
That seems a very accomplishable goal for us to make an effort to reach out to more comedians of color, to give them a better platform, or to give them another platform, rather. Not to say that ours is better or worse than any platform out there.
No, just helping provide stage time to people that are putting in good work. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I don't know if you saw it today, but there's a comedian who last night posted some really hateful. I've been a cop for 25 years, and these people are burning down their own businesses, and they are looting, and they are sort of stuff that everyone's come out and unfriended and all that sort of stuff. But what do you say if he wants to do a set?
Is he funny?
He's a cop?
He was a cop for 25 years.
I say no.
Is he funny?
His defense is he's now a lawyer who works with in defense.
In defense of police?
No, in defense of the accused. So he's like, I'm not racist. This is just my experience. Has been.
All I'm saying is that we book people. I mean, if they're a child molester, we should not book them. But
what if they're clearly a racist online?
But the main question is, when it comes to booking, is are they funny? And I mean, if it's so far that he's a terrible person, then yeah, I'm not going to book him, because there are two aspects to booking somebody: whether they're easy to work with, whether you like them as a person, or if they're funny, and it's a scale of the both. And if it leans way towards being a piece of shit, yeah, I'm not booking them.
Well, could we also think about adding another question, which is, does this person deserve a platform?
Comedy is different, I think.
Comedy is different than what?
Than other platforms.
What do you mean?
I would say that comedy is mostly about funny. And listen, if this person is such a terrible person, and that's going to come out in their comedy, and if it's not going to work, if it's not going to work. So if their comedy is insanely racist and hateful, people aren't going to like it, and I'm probably not going to like it.
Sure. I also think funny is subjective.
Yes, but I think, especially with the comedy studio, we have such a specific crowd that...
We don't, though. I mean, we have...
our crowd's usually pretty similar.
Be what?
White liberal, yeah.
All right, who could probably benefit from hearing different voices?
Yes, no, what I'm saying is that if we book somebody who is a hateful racist, their comedy is probably going to be hateful and racist, and our crowd is not going to like it. And if our crowd doesn't like it, I'm probably not going to like it. I'm saying the comedy usually speaks for itself because stand-up comedy is so personal.
Sure.
So if somebody is a terrible racist person, it's going to come out in their comedy, and if it's hateful and racist, it's not going to be good comedy. So you can usually judge somebody by how funny their comedy is.
Of course, yes, I agree.
Is there a comedian that you can name that's made you laugh very much, but is also a terrible person?
Yes,
Bill Cosby. I got Bill Cosby. I just named one. Shit.
Hundreds of them.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go get more coffee while Danny goes through his list of.
Well, I'm not gonna.
I would say I think I have dug myself into a corner with that one. That's a bad question.
I mean, you're right. It didn't do you any favors.
No.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I really learned when I got into comedy in a serious way was that just because someone is funny does not mean they're a good person. I do
agree with that. Yeah,
this person's funny. They get it. They're on the level. They'd have to be to make these funny jokes. That's not true at all. There are so many shitheads I know. So many shitheads who are hilarious, but are bad people.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I won't, but I could rattle off the top of my head right now 24 names.
But I guess with me, I've only done comedy for 3 years. Just from what I've seen, at least, most of the people that suck at comedy are also bad people.
Sure, yes, that's true. And but at the same time, I know plenty of people who suck at comedy who are great people and who I enjoy.
I have also seen that too, yeah.
But are very bad on stage.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question of all the comedians who are good. Don't all of them have to have some sort of dark point or some something that's
Some
not
disagreeable
Well,
aspect to them.
I think to be great at comedy, and if I actually believe this, I'd probably be better at comedy. But I think to be great at comedy, you have to have a degree of selfishness. But selfishness is not necessarily evil. It's good. You need to take care of yourself as a person. You should go for what makes you happy. You should go for what's good for you. And hopefully that doesn't hurt others.
Of course, I would say most of the people who are selfish enough to make it as famous comedians aren't great.
Yeah.
Same as the president. Takes a hell of a lot of selfishness and ego and drive and a depth of darkness to run for president and win, right? For the most part.
Yeah. Well, taking care of yourself and going for your interests and your dreams has a degree of selfishness.
You're
But
right,
that doesn't
it
mean that
does.
you can't also be generous to your community. You can't, do stuff for charity. You can't speak out against evil. It's just there's a certain degree of selfishness that it takes to like really, trust yourself and like really want to get the best for yourself. There are some people that have that, and there's some people that go way too far.
Yes, who realize that what they don't really like is the comedy, it's the selfishness.
Yeah, exactly.
The avenue.
Well, there are some people who do comedy specifically to make money as opposed to doing comedy because they like making people laugh. You've seen plenty of people.
I'm not sure. I don't think there's many of those. Just
Not
because it
many,
takes
but
so
there-
much to get to the point where you can make money.
Yeah, but there's I guess it's hard to like really phrase it because there are people who do comedy and are good at it, but don't do it because they necessarily love making people laugh. And I'm sure you've seen people like that before. I've seen people who like treat it specifically like it's once you get to a certain point, they treat it like it's a job moreover than like
Yeah, I've watched Rick's comedy, and it's pretty clear to me that he hates making people laugh. So I
and
understand
making
what-
money.
Well, that's why I picked those jokes. This one won't make them laugh.
Yeah. Rick, I feel like you were gonna maybe say something before I cut you off. Were you?
No, I wonder if, like I said, if you start out as a stand-up comic, I think it's very difficult to be doing it just for the money unless you've been doing it so long that's worn off or whatever.
I guess there's all.
Coming from the other thing, and like if you're an actor or if you're famous for something else, coming down and doing comedy to make money,
Yeah.
about the level of the game, I think I see that more than.
I think the selfishness really comes into selfishness of ego. Is a selfishness to want people to see you to be, I guess, famous for a lack of a better term. But like people do it specifically because they want to feel like a big shot, as opposed to they do it because they like making people laugh, which I think is the best reason to do comedy.
Yeah, and that's why there's a huge PR industry, and a segment of the PR industry is all about damage control.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this came out that doesn't fit the image we're trying to make. How do we correct that?
So to get back to what we were talking about before, how can we offer our platform to deserving comics, however that gets decided, who are marginalized in society? Could that be a criteria we consider, that this person deserves a platform that societally he or she or they have not been given, and that we could possibly provide that, or provide a pathway to that?
The short answer, I think, is yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's what we got into with the Anjan thing, where he was like, how come this woman is getting a spot? We know that you're trying to book comic in residence, with certain quotas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the specific case he was asking about was a more money related.
Yeah, right. But I don't think there's any way you could look at our list of comic in residence of 12 and say that's the top 12.
What do you mean?
I mean, we do consciously say, all right, women have historically had problems getting this platform. People of color have had it, and we lean a little bit more towards making sure that we have a diverse lineup.
I do think,
So it is
yeah.
something we take into consideration.
I do think comic in residence is something that, at least while I've been on, is something that we've tried to use to help people that could use a a chance, because it's a whole month to get access to the Comedy Studio stage every single night, good nights and bad nights. So it's something that we've tried to use to, like, you know, give a voice to somebody who doesn't have as much of a voice, or has not had access to, like, to full crowds.
And also right now we're immediately going to the thing we have power and control over, of saying, you know, how are we going to do this? You know, let's also think about what do we do about the people of color who we are working with. You know, is that you know, should we be moving them up to headliner? Is this, you know, something that we, you know, we're being patronizing white people, saying, like, I'm going to give you this platform. You know, I don't have any answers on it. These are just the questions that have been going through my mind.
I think it's really important to not frame it. It's important for us not to see our actions as, like, white heroism.
Yeah, I mean, again,
I think our goal should just be to level the playing field somewhat in whatever way we can. And maybe, you know, that involves consulting with people who are outside of our organization and outside of our lived experiences. You know, because we can talk in circles all day, and, you know, it's good to talk about this kind of stuff, but you know, at a certain point, we're very limited by our experiences and our privilege. Or I am, at least.
I am definitely also.
I don't know about you two. Okay, well, Rick is
suburbs, private school, college, the works. Yeah,
I went to Catholic school for 10 years, and it was not a very diverse Catholic school.
You know, my dad also went to Catholic school for 10 years.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, we know each other. There's a Facebook group for
a lot of Jews in Memphis went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was raised public school until I was about 12, I think it was. But yeah, my neighborhood we were definitely a black moved into the neighborhood. There's a house for sale down the street. You know, I hope they don't, because there could go the neighborhood. Once, you know, one moves in, then another moves in, and before you know it, you know, I mean, there was a lot of that kind of talk, right? You know, just you know, blatantly out there. And that also goes to Martin Luther King's point of, hey, those people, we know who they are. We know how to deal with them. We know what we're dealing with. It's the moderate liberal that is difficult. It's the, you know, once my dad, I was telling him, because I was dating a woman who's black, and her brother went to Harvard and Princeton and was working at Goldman Sachs and is a millionaire now from working there. And I was telling him about her, and like, oh, and her brother is a millionaire. And he said, my dad said, millionaire, what, we play sports or something? You know, I think that's racist, but by the time I figured out that it was racist, it was, you know, it takes that extra leap there. Those are the kind of knee-jerk things, I think, that's going to be the real problem for us white liberal moderates to, you know, to get that sort of thinking out of our heads.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yeah, I'd agree. There's some, you know, you have reactions as you grow older. You just have reactions to things people say. It just doesn't even occur to you that what you just said is wrong or stupid.
How was the diversity for you guys? I mean, Emerson is pretty white.
Very white, and definitely very inclusive in the sexuality and sexual identity department, but as far as other races went, not very diverse, no.
And high school was like that as well?
Private school in Memphis, Tennessee, yeah, no, the diversity was mostly white, a lot of Jews, very small black population, very small, specifically Chinese population, because we have an exchange program with a school in China, so we had a lot of Chinese exchange students, but still not a large part of the school population, but yeah, mostly white. Mostly rich. Like this school, like the school I went to, like clearly, like, this was somebody that, like, a lot of people's parents at that school, they own a lot of property in Memphis, probably, like, one of the biggest lawyers in Memphis, one of the biggest bankers in Memphis, is high-profile, elite Memphis parents.
My experience was similar. I don't know if my school had as many elite people, but very well could have, and it was certainly a pretty affluent school. I went to private Catholic school in Oklahoma City. Our student population was vastly white, entirely heteronormative, of course, because it's a Catholic school. I grew up in a suburb of Oklahoma City called Edmond, which is also very white. When I left Oklahoma for New York, I was a very sheltered person, and I still am. My experiences, at least with people who are different than me, have helped educate me to a degree, but the onus to keep going falls on me, and I have been pretty passive about it up until now, about educating myself more, instead of letting the experiences of people I know dictate what I learn. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, and it also bothers me how comedy seems to be, as we go along, comedy seems to be becoming more and more something for a white kid with some memes. And it's not as bad as improv, but when stand-up started, it was pretty much because it was it didn't cost anything. It was a way to express yourself. You could get in there. It was a job nobody else wanted. Now you have people with a little bit of advantage wanting to do that job. It's a little bit more competitive.
Luckily, I would say with stand-up, at least, taking a class does not give you an advantage.
Yeah.
With stand-up specifically, I'd say I'd feel like the people who skip the class and just go to open mics and do comedy have get much better at it than people who took the time and money to take a class on stand-up.
Yeah. Well, remember, Def Comedy Jam came out of the black community. Well, Martin Lawrence, a couple well-known comics, to say, hey, we're not getting seen on TV. We're not headlining clubs. We're not there's this chitlin circuit, but you're not gonna get mainstream success through that.
Yeah.
So it's something that's always been there.
Well, at least we are in a position to learn and grow and do what we can within our organization to help make things better a little bit. Well, I mean, at least we're aware of it.
Yeah. To give you an idea, I always thought this was really interesting because when a young black comic would be working with me and I'd be like, get rid of the nickname. You should be working as yourself and you're being personal and all that. And then I found out that in the black community, that there's a real tradition of that, because traditionally, black comedians weren't traveling around the country. If they were going to be able to perform and say, my boss is an asshole, they didn't want their real name attached to that. That you were, most comedians, but a lot of black comedians worked under nicknames, Cedric the Entertainer, things like that. So that word couldn't get back of, oh, did you hear what so-and-so said about so-and-so? That it was a way of hiding. So just some of that history and stuff, I think, gives you, you start seeing that there's a depth and real roots to this that, just changing, just not giving the police tanks isn't going to pull it out by the root.
I'd agree.
Sure, but it's a helpful step. Yeah, I mean, the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? Just because saying, well, doing this one thing won't solve everything, so why even bother? That doesn't help anyone.
It's wanting to even the playing field, is making it so that we as citizens in the United States actually, because what it seems like with this country for a while is it seems like as much as we'd like to say that the people have a say, it doesn't really seem like it matters. So what we want to act like our voice to actually, lead to change.
Right, and then you get into Cornel West saying and feeling that America is a failed democratic experiment. We tried capitalism, where on paper everyone is the same, and because capitalism, it means by definition that everyone's in competition, which means there's going to be winners and losers, and people with advantage and people without advantage. Does it go that deep that the idea of democracy and capitalism can't work? After 200 years, we've been giving it a shot.
Well, we've been giving it a shot, but we've been giving... People have been taking advantage of the system, so even by giving it a shot, we're not actually giving it a fair shot. We're giving it a one-sided shot. Where, to make it fair, we haven't even tried to actually make it fair. We've just let it be unfair without actually fixing it. It can work. Any system of government, whether it's communism, capitalism, can work. But people, by their very nature, take advantage of it.
Yeah, but I mean, capitalism itself is unfair, just the concept of it.
But you can make it more fair than it is. It, by its nature, is unfair, but you can make it relatively fair. You can make it so that if somebody does lose, they can get up and come back.
There's a social net.
Yeah, and if somebody wins, they don't necessarily have to stomp out everybody else to win.
Right. My concern is that you've got the two tracks of, unless you have 100% inheritance tax, then your parents are going to be able to send you to a better school, so you've got a little bit of a leg up, and then you got, and so you get those, the people with the slight disadvantage at the start, and the people with the slight advantage there, through their families, you get to the point where we are now in 2020, where the gap is just that big.
Yeah. Well, the first step, at least, is to take small steps.
The first step is to get rid of the tanks.
Yeah.
Well, the main thing is that, like, even if we're a failed state, the only way you change something is by not giving up on change. So, if society was like, America's failed and that's it, then great, we live in a failed state. But you only fix it by wanting to fix it.
At the voting booth?
At the voting booth, wherever it is possible to change it. Change comes in many forms.
Well, I will be researching ways to do that.
I am registered to vote.
It's step
Here
one.
or Memphis?
Here.
Well, that does nothing.
Yeah, so I've heard.
Yeah, you gotta vote by mail for Mar-a-Lago.
Mm.
That's how you get real change done. What do you guys think the election's gonna look like? I mean, we're running out of time, but how do you think the recent events will impact the election?
I don't think he's gonna win, but again, seeing all this stuff about
Trump?
people, I don't think Trump's gonna win. I just seeing all these people living in this bubble that they live in, where they don't see any of like what's actually going on in the world. In America, it's very possible that he'll still get a lot of votes, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't think he's gonna win, though.
Do you think he's going to acknowledge it?
I think it'll come to a point where his staff will turn on him.
His staff or the Secret Service?
The Secret Service. But like, I feel like staff members, Secret Service. I would not be surprised. It's.
So, Rick, you're saying if he loses the election and then refuses to concede his office, right?
I wonder. Yeah,
I wonder too.
I think he runs on fear.
People at all? It's just in the last 2 days that I've started seeing. Yeah, I could totally see him say, "We're in a state of crisis, so we're gonna postpone the election." Or, with all the mail-in ballots, the election was rife with fraud. So
yeah, it's very clear that he's basically telegraphing that is going to be.
I'm going to declare that the election null and void, and and I've got my vicious dogs and my weapons behind this fence.
God, yeah, I mean, he literally said release the hounds, basically. Not literally, but he might as well have said release the hounds. That's crazy. I mean, so the big thing that his presidency has taught me, at least, is that American norms are fragile. Like they're not these big steel beams of
Right.
freedom and democracy that we thought they were. They can easily be disregarded and shat all over if there's no one willing to hold the president in check.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the Constitution says that whoever wins the election is president as of January 20th. Or if there's no election, it falls down the chain of command to whomever, House of Rep, the Speaker of the House or whatever. But like, my fear is what's going to stop him from shitting on that institution too. I mean, there are so many American institutions that he has like wiped his ass with. Hopefully the Secret Service, if he pulls this kind of shit, if he loses in November and then refuses to leave, hopefully, at noon on January 20th or whatever time it is, he will stop being president and he will be viewed as a trespasser by the Secret Service. But I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in our institutions right now to uphold tradition for good.
Yeah, Andy seems so unhinged that I wonder, if we're going to be able to get to, the second Tuesday of November.
Get to meaning, you think the election will be canceled or the country will be a smoldering pile of ruins?
Yeah, or he's, he just seems so unhinged that I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. Which, like, how can anyone want that in a president?
Yeah. I mean, Nixon was also crazy. Now we're going back and finding out exactly how paranoid he was. He was calling for getting IRS tax audits on all Jews because he felt the Jews were against him. He had that big inferiority complex thing as well. It's just that was then, and that was the last time we really thought, hey, the country might not get through this.
And now it's that situation on steroids, basically.
I think the only real difference is that we have so much more media now.
And do you think Trump has more, not to get too deep into this, do you think Trump has more enablers than Nixon as well? I mean, at a certain point.
Well, I think
Nixon
just by the very
quit
nature of
because
human life, there's just more people in the world than there were when Nixon was around. I think there are more Americans, like, population-wise than... So, just mathematically, I think, he's got more supporters than Nixon did.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to look back and go, and say, oh, well, everyone loved Martin Luther King. It's like, no, he had a lot of, he had a lot that, he was a very polarizing figure.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Like, oh, Nixon was evil and everybody hated him. It's like, no, Nixon's the one who coined the phrase the silent majority. He said, you've got all these kids out there protesting. The real majority is sitting at home on TV watching, saying, what are they doing? I wish the president would just call out the troops and stop that. That was the whole concept of the moral majority was based on Nixon's idea of the silent majority.
Yep. I had something I was going to say, but I forgot. Yeah. So
get out there and vote.
Go out there and vote. Get out there and support, marginalized people in any way that you can.
And listen to your black friends. It's not about you.
You're right. It's not.
Nope.
That's a hard thing to get over for any human being. But it's an important lesson. It's one that God knows I have a hard time grasping from time to time. I'll admit I'm not perfect. I'm something of a narcissist.
Well, and
but you're right. It's not about me.
We're very fortunate that we have friends who will talk to us, who do still see the possibility of hope and change and are willing to talk to us. And we're very lucky that we have a place where people can talk. We can, we can do some listening where, even at work.
All right. Comedy recommendations. Right. Oh, we should also mention we're doing a live show on June 6th. You can stream it on our website. We've got a great lineup. You can find that on our website as well. You can get tickets on our website too. So that's this Saturday, June 6th at 8 p.m. EST. We're doing a show. Please watch it if you want to. So that's the promotion stuff out of the way.
Yeah, that's also difficult. It's
sorry,
like, hey,
I'm buffering.
Yeah, even with all of that, we need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to promote our comedy show.
Job, to spend all day, protesting or researching.
And that's the, it's capitalism, right?
That is capitalism.
All right, comedy recommendations. Very funny show on Netflix that just got canceled. I think it was announced yesterday or today. It's a sketch show called The Astronomy Club.
Hmm.
Check it out. It's very funny. One season on Netflix. The Astronomy Club. They canceled it. I don't know what their viewership numbers are because Netflix doesn't release that kind of thing. But I watched it with my friends a few months ago, and it's a lot of really funny sketches. So check that out. What about you, Rick?
Well, this was before the world went completely to shit. When this was just COVID, I saw something. It's a little 10-minute film, kind of half animated and stuff, on the great toilet paper shortage.
Hmm.
And it sort of ties into COVID. But way back in the '70s, Johnny Carson made a joke on his monologue that there was a shortage of toilet paper, and the medium was so powerful that it became a shortage, and he had to go on television a week later and say, "Hey, everybody, stop that! It's not." So it's just a little 10-minute documentary thing of how people heard there was a toilet paper shortage, and everyone went to the stores and bought it up, and there was you know panic buying and all that, and they tie it to COVID at the end. But yeah, it's just a little 10-minute thing that's kind of funny how we sometimes get excited over things that aren't that important.
Yeah. What about you, Eli?
Another show on Netflix, the Steve Carell show and Greg Daniels' Space Force.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
I love it. I think it's insanely
Really?
good. Yes, I think it's very heartfelt and it's a good mix of Steve Carell's comedic and serious acting that he's developed over the years.
I agree. He's very good in it. Although the voice he does is so weird. We haven't finished it. We've watched maybe half of it. It's like it's close to being funny, but it's like just not funny enough. Like
It's got funny parts, and I like the funny parts, but it's also got heartwarming parts that I like
it
too.
does, but it there's something missing. I don't know. It's did you watch Upload on Amazon Prime, which was also a
No.
Greg Daniels like high concept sci-fi show that came out
Hmm.
I don't know a month ago maybe, which was similarly like it was an engaging watch, but there was just like something missing. And I felt that way also about like the first Parks and Rec season. Um, so maybe it's just a Greg Daniels thing for me, but I'm glad you like Space Force.
I don't know what.
don't
Yeah,
know.
I've heard it's got mixed reviews, but I think it's like people are on both sides. Either they love it or they don't like it. I love it.
I like. I think John Malkovich is great in it.
Yes, I agree.
I mean, all the talent is. Yeah, Space Force. Tawny Newsome is very funny. Nice to see her. She's from Bajillion Dollar Properties, which is a show I liked a lot. Space Force. God love them. All right, now Eli, you of course have instituted a new final segment on our
Yeah.
show, which is highlighting local businesses in this time of need. Would you
Uh,
like to?
yeah, I would. I think this time I'm going to once again point at people in the direction of the Massachusetts Bail Fund. That's www.massbailfund.org. Uh, with all these protests going on, people are being arrested for protesting, and they can't get out without bail. So donate what you can, help out. There's also bail funds for other cities: Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit. I would recommend helping out in whatever way you can.
That's interesting. Now that you mention, I don't. Do we know like how many people are being processed, or what bail is being set at, or
I don't know the numbers off
I
the
don't
top of
know.
my head, no. But
yeah,
Mass Bail Fund will have more info.
yeah. I wonder what bail is being set at, because once you do bail, you still have to come back.
Yeah. I would still, you have a higher chance. I do remember reading that you have a higher chance of winning your case if you are able to post bail.
Which is also a great system.
Yeah,
Our system is fucked. But for more info and donate what you can, go to www.massbailfund.org.
I'd like to second that. I'd also like to add the Coast Cafe is a local Cambridge restaurant that's doing takeout and delivery Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. They're a local black-owned business. They make very yummy food. Rosa introduced me to them. So if you're in the local area and you're looking to get takeout, I highly recommend the Coast Cafe.
yeah. They're very good. They're over on is it River or
I think
West?
yeah, they're in that area. I think they're on
Yeah,
River.
I think it's River. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, go there a lot. Terrific. My weird one because I basically have not been leaving the house.
Mm-hmm.
But just kind of a shout out sort of thing. There's a laundromat closer to Porter, right there by Elm and Somerville Ave, and they've got a couple televisions. And what they're doing, but I don't know if they even plan this, but a lot of the people I worry about, the addicted and the homeless, are basically going there and having a place. So they, for the cost of one load of laundry, they can spend the day there,
Mm.
with the television and be inside, whether it's warm up or cool down or whatever. And it's sort of become a obviously not ideal, but at least a little bit of a refuge for some of the people who are most marginalized.
What's the name of the laundromat?
I don't know. It's just it's Somerville Avenue between Elm and Porter.
Is it Showcase Laundromat?
Could be.
Well, we'll just say it is.
Support your local laundromat.
Elm and Somerville Laundromat.
Yeah.
I get Showcase Laundromat. So I hope it's
It's
them.
next to a Subway and a Starbucks and all that.
All right. So this has been challenging to record, certainly, but I think it is important for us to at least talk about this amongst ourselves. I mean, I know we're also doing this for quote unquote mass consumption. I mean, the masses are not necessarily subscribing to our podcast, but some people are. And, but at the very least, it's good for us to talk about this because it's hard to. It's hard to acknowledge this. It's hard to acknowledge our complicity.
Complicitness?
Yeah.
So it's a big word.
Especially being a dumb shit like I am, doesn't even know what words are. So, thank you guys
and another real quick point is that we sort of needed the pretext of a podcast to discuss it.
That's true.
If we didn't have this, would we be having this conversation? And don't we need to have these conversations?
I would probably have this conversation at our next business meeting later today.
But thank you guys for having this conversation, the first of many. Thank you to everyone listening. If there's, if you're listening and if, I'm sure we have lots of major blind spots. If you noticed some that were egregious or if you have any resources for us that you feel like sharing, you can email me at danny.hatch@thecomedystudio.com. I don't want to ask people to educate me, but if you're listening and I said something very stupid or left something out and you want to email me, please feel free to, because I need to learn stuff.
Feel free to let me know at my email address. It's eli.levy, Levy, @thecomedystudio.com.
So thanks for listening, everyone. I look forward to this organization doing more to help. All right. Bye.
So long.
Ooh, pizza's here.